people are familiar with Indra's web, which is basically a cosmic web, which is made out of millions of hexagons. They all, each forms a center, okay, and it stretches into infinity. And I saw myself as a cosmic web, but each center was an aspect of me. And the other thing I saw was also that there was another layer to this web. It was not a two-dimensional web, it was more like a three-dimensional web, where I could see past lives, you know. And also in Business of Infinity I go a little bit more into it. And there I became aware of my past on other planets. And that's another really experience which tells you a lot about the reason why you think the way you are, why you do what you do, you know, where you come from. And very often when we visit our past lives, or when we get an experience of our past lives, they explain a lot about our present life. So what I want to do in this project, virtual reality project, I want to, rather than doing things which are quite normal, I want to go a step further and touch on things which are quite unusual, you know, quite out of the ordinary, to just give a better idea that we should perhaps allow ourselves to open ourselves up to new experiences. You know, what most people do when they see a medium, what most people want to know is whether their loved ones are okay. You know, that is very often the primary motivation to make contact with mediums and to find out more about life after death. But to me, things have changed a bit, because I think we need to explore the other realities a little bit more in detail, because this is our next frontier, you know. And the more people start sort of widening their perception and looking at it in a bigger context, the more it will be possible for us to, for more people to sort of participate, because the way I see it, we are a collective. Every one of us here, we are part of a collective that is our part of our humanness, you know. And the way information about life after death spreads and people are inspired and then they come together like we do in this group, we are creating a sort of a level, point of gravity where consciousness grows, you know, where we become stronger in our acceptance of life after death, and we are becoming more confident about it, and as a consequence, these things become more real to us, and we have got easier access to it. That's how I see it, you know. And that's why I think it's important that we gradually explore these things. And I'm really interested when I talk to fellow out-of-body experiences. Sometimes they say exactly the things which I have experienced, and it's really, really important that it comes from other people as well, you know. So then it's a bit like going into exploring the Amazon rainforest, you know. Gradually, the first person meets a tribe who have never seen any foreigners, any outside people, and then another person confirms, yes, there are other human beings who we didn't know. There are different animal species we had no idea of, you know. So gradually our knowledge increases and expands. And I had some really interesting conversations with fellow astral travelers and about cities they visited, and very interesting. For example, what is quite rare is to go into higher states of consciousness, which is more difficult because we have to do a lot of preparatory work in order to untie ourselves from our identifications. So if we have habits or identification or hang-ups or some sort of misguided feeling of who we are, and therefore limiting ourselves, all these things have to be surrendered, and when we surrender, only when we are able to surrender it, are we able to go through the gate into a higher state of consciousness, and this is really interesting what happens, and that can happen in a variety of ways, and Wendy touched on one where I mentioned Heaven's Gate. There's one way of getting it. There was literally a gate, incredibly beautiful heavenly gate at this point, and I knew when I go through there I would be in a higher level. At another time, and they can be so different, the gateways can be as diverse as people are. And I had various entry points in this. One was during meditation, where I suddenly became aware that there was another me waiting. Okay, another me, and I was afraid of this other me, but this other me was very strong and very powerful, and I suddenly said, I suddenly thought, I'm a bit scared. What is this? What is this other me that was waiting? Until I suddenly realized I had to drop this me, which I thought was me, this Jurgen. I had to drop it and just become it. And the other me was a totally more wise, more free person, liberated person. And I said, oh God, yeah, that's who I am. That is the real me. And suddenly everything was okay. And that is another gateway where we can transition from one state of consciousness to another. Another one was where I had an out-of-body experience, and I was chanting the Om mantra, which I always recommend to people who have out-of-body experiences, and a lot of my fellow astral travelers have taken it up, that they start sort of chanting the Om mantra. Now, the Om mantra is a very powerful sound. It connects us to the origin, to the primal sound. It's not just hearsay. It's actually a reality, which has substance and has got a vibration which is very powerful. So I started chanting this Om sound, and suddenly I was lifted up into the air, and out of the sky there was a beam of light coming towards me, and with it a lot of rose petals fell down on me, and they were experienced like a blessing, so I rose up into this sky, and then I was greeted by, it sounds really corny, but then I was greeted by a choir of angels. and it was not just, a dozen or so, it was thousands. And I was overwhelmed that they were all there to sort of greet me. But it was an incredibly beautiful chorus. And the only way I could explain it to me, I thought, obviously, they wouldn't come all to greet me, so that must be in my mind. I must have made it up. There must have been a thought form, Only later did I find out that these are actually quite real events to a lot of people who have had similar experience. There are sometimes near-death experience. They've got a reception committee. Sometimes they can have different forms, you know, like a choir. You know, that's one answer. The other answer is I met a lot of people who I considered to be angelic, you know, but I didn't really name them as angels. I just saw them as people who had overcome their limitations, their ego identification, and just liberated from their constraints of their human identification. And as a result of it, they became angelic, you know, pure, incredibly beautiful, incredible aura of love, lightful entities. And I saw them in different forms. A couple I saw, they were guarding an entrance of a kind of cathedral which I entered into, and they were very tall, and they had a very beautiful aura and a beautiful presence, and they, you know, asked me into this sort of dome which I entered. And then I found another group. They were singing. They were a group of these incredibly beautiful people. I like to call them people. They were gathered around a pond, an incredible, beautiful pond with unimaginable flowers, and they were singing. But the way they sung was something you just can't imagine, you know. It was incredibly beautiful, and so my theory with regard to angels is they're just people. There may be, I mean, I've only scratched the surface. I'm sure there are entities, angels of a completely different order and magnitude, but this is how far my experience goes. And I think later I found people mentioning Swedenborg who thought the same. Swedenborg thought that angels are basically people who have advanced to a state of consciousness where they're no longer laden with the human frailties. You know, they've liberated people, and they're doing things differently. You know, they're on a different level of existence. You know, and then of course. That is when we reach that level, let's say the angelic level, where we sort of liberate ourselves and get to this level, then our real life, I would say, really begins, you know. Until then, it's all kids' play, you know. The things we identify ourselves with, the things we are up to, they're just child games. When we awaken to our true nature, is when we start becoming real. You know, we become more powerful, more aware that we are all one big family, you know, and then things start to open up for us which are undescribable, you know, and